Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Wilson Center. Welcome back, Minister. Hello. On behalf of the Women in Public Service Project, I would like to welcome you to today's discussion on the relationship between law and culture and modernity in promoting women's equality in the UAE. We are also delighted to co-sponsor this event with the Middle East program. We're happy to have such a diverse audience of ambassadors, government representatives, universities, foundations, and private sector entities. For those of you who don't know, the Women in Public Service Project has a simple and yet very ambitious goal of ensuring that 50% of public leadership positions across the globe are held by women. We will do this by creating an index to measure where governments across the globe are in terms of women's participation in leadership positions, by creating research and evidence base of why it matters to have women included in decision-making and leadership roles, and by networking, promoting, sponsoring, and mentoring women to enter into governments and rise to leadership positions across the globe. The UAE Embassy has been a major supporter of our work and our program. Thus, it is both fitting and an honor to have with us today Her Excellency Sheikha Lubna Al-Qasimi, a true leader in public service. Sheikha Lubna Al-Qasimi is today the Minister for Tolerance, the first to head this newly created ministry. Prior to that, Sheikha Lubna was the first woman in the UAE to hold a ministerial position when she became the Minister of Economy in 2004. In 2008, she became the Minister of Foreign Trade, and in 2013, the Minister of International Cooperation and Development. She's not only a minister, but she's also the president of Zayed University and sits on various boards, including as a member of the governing board of Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. She has various university degrees, has studied in the US, UK, and Lebanon, and Japan, I just found out this morning. She holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from California State University at Chico, an executive master's degree in business administration from the American University of Sharjah in the UAE, and she has honorary doctorates in science from California State University, Chico, in law from the University of Exeter in the UK, and in economics from the Hankook University of Foreign Studies in Korea. Her Excellency was recently awarded an honorary doctorate in humane letters from the Lebanese American University in Lebanon. And in 2016, she was included in the Wall Street Journal as among the most important 50 international women to watch, and I believe is 42nd in the world, according to Forbes, if I'm correct. We are honored to have with us today Sheikha Lubna, a woman demonstrating leadership in public service.
Thank you.
Please welcome her to the stage.
Thank you. And I started by making a mistake. I should have sat there and then came over. Did you like to come for this? I can do that. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very delighted to be here. I don't know which parts I could think of. I almost feel like I'm a person of many lives, not just one. But the one that's very close to my heart is I'm a computer geek. I started my job, my career, everything in technology. I worked for over 16 years in technology prior to working with the government. And a lot of people ask me sometimes, how could someone who comes from technology can move easily or actually does move easily to a public sector job? And for me, the idea of working in technology is not about the code writing, which I did in early years of my career, but it's more into the organization, how you transform organizations in terms of their processes, building efficiencies, and looking a way of increased productivity and sometimes profitability. One of the areas or the places that I worked at that was quite great for me was working for Dubai Ports. Dubai Ports Authority launched their IT strategy in 1993 when I joined them. And the idea was actually to increase their efficiency, productivity, and hence for their profitability. Dubai ports became one of the top ports worldwide right now. And if you remember, but it was, I think, 2004 when they acquired the P&O and took over a lot of ports worldwide as part of their investment. And here within the US, there was a big challenge for 6 ports. They could not, that was part of the deal, but they could not get it. There was a lot of resistance, political resistance at that time. And I came to lobby. It was my first task as a Minister of Economy, and my first job at the government was actually to come back to the US and to lobby for Dubai ports and understand why this deal didn't go through here within the 6 ports in the US. And at some points, somebody actually had labeled me in an interview as Dubai's secret weapon. And the reason for that was they said, you know, Dubai didn't just send anyone. They sent a woman. And this woman, not only a person who's part of the government, but had worked for the port. She understands the port operation. She's a technology person. So in many ways, the image of being an Emirati, a UAE woman lobbying for a certain cause had made a difference. Just the fact that I would walk into meetings or see a congressman or a senator, they get surprised because in their mind, the perception is women do not appear or reach these kind of jobs at that time. And they ask, and I get questioned all the time, so do you live in the States? And I said, no, I live in my country. I'm part of the government. So in their minds, again, it's like they would believe that if you're a woman and you're advanced that well, then maybe you're living in the States. But I think for the United Arab Emirates, the women has been the best messengers and ambassadors to showcase the United Arab Emirates and the development and the advancement. Now, you may think, was this a one-off case? No, it's not. We have a lot of women doctors. We have a lot of women engineers. One interesting organization you may not be aware of is a company called Strata. Strata works on 3 parts of the Boeing and the Airbus. This company hired a lot of engineers, but predominantly women engineers, and they're Emirati women. So this is a great example, again, of the UAE. I'm a board member for ENAC, the Emirates Nuclear Energy. And if you go to the sites, you'll see some women nuclear engineers now. So UAE had always encouraged the science path for women, whether they're doctors or engineers. But even in the public sector, there's a higher number of women in the government sector working from senior jobs to other levels as well. What the UAE is doing now for the women is driving mandates and interests for the youth. And by appointing the youngest minister in the world, who's 22 years old, the Minister of State for Youth, Her Excellency Ms. Shamma Al-Mazroui, is a young, smart woman, and she created what we call youth circles within the Emirates, and the first one that was launched abroad was here with our embassy in Washington, D.C. The idea here is the government feels responsible for the youth, and no better way to actually serve the fate and the future of the youth and their children. You won't be able to serve this unless you have someone equivalent of Shamma who interacts quite a lot with the youth, and they put the agenda forward for the government in terms of mandates, what's the need and the requirements. For a simple reason, I talk to my nephews. I'm 58 years old, but sometimes, and I'm considered to be a yuppie minister despite my age because I was in technology. I was called by the kids, most of the kids, as a cool minister because I did technology before. However, the idea that sometimes when I have a dialogue with my nephews, I find myself sometimes puzzled because I don't understand their needs. And we believe that the way to do it is by making sure that the youth themselves are participants in the government through this track of the Ministry of Youth, through the Minister of State for Youth. I'm going to stop now, and I will continue the dialogue with Kent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Al-Qasimi. Good afternoon. I'm Kent Davis-Packard. I'm a professor of Middle East Studies at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. And I'd like to thank the Wilson Center, Gwen Young, for commissioning this paper, and the United Arab Emirates Embassy for all of their support for this research. The paper is entitled Women Behind the Scenes: How Modernity is Catching On Before the Law in the United Arab Emirates. And I titled it that because through my many interviews with Emirati women over a 3-month period between October and December 2016, whether they were high-level diplomats, university students, policymakers, businesswomen, their anecdotes, their personal stories presented a new pattern of behavior that didn't actually correspond to some of the laws that are currently in place that impact women, including family laws. For example, while the law requires male guardianship and therefore male permission under the precepts of Sharia for a daughter to marry, travel, and work, not a single Emirati interviewee mentioned that they had to actually appeal to a male guardian to live their lives the way they wished. One even noted that she wasn't even aware of this legal requirement. This is not to say they were disobeying Sharia law, but rather families were not acting in opposition to their daughters' choices. When I asked why, they said that over the last few decades, it simply didn't work for Emiratis, in essence, to be unhappy. I wanted to know what triggered this change in mentality, and what I discovered was that the UAE government has used a top-down approach to steadily empower Emirati women since its founding in 1971, when Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak al-Kadbi, the First Lady, started a 2-room schoolhouse in a small city, Al Ain, and then went from family to family, offering to subsidize them if they sent their daughters to that school. She was also regularly consulted and a close advisor to her husband, the president. And even many years later, her husband ran into a young genetic biologist who was a graduate of that 2-room schoolhouse. And to now, a time in which we witness 8 women ministers out of 29 total cabinet members, 25% of their legislative equivalent, with the only female to lead a national assembly in the Arab world, outshining the United States female percentages in both its cabinet and Congress, 70% women university graduates, and an increasing number of women pursuing science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, among many other achievements. What were the motivations for the government's top-down approach? Its leadership saw that it was economically beneficial not to leave out 50% of its potential workforce, and also Emirati men were looking for wives who were educated like them. And so even the more traditional families wanted their girls educated. But there was another socio-cultural motivation that caught my attention, and it was values-based. All of the Emiratis I interviewed agreed that while there was not a women's movement in the UAE per se, there is a changing consciousness about women's roles and an all-pervading viewpoint that women have talents to bring to the table, not because they are women, but because they, as individuals, have talents to bring to the table. It's no longer a gender question or a gender agenda, but rather an agenda based on wanting to improve leadership overall in the country. And this mentality, set by the example at the highest echelons of the UAE's leadership, has translated into the UAE's work internationally, where, for example, at the United Nations, Ambassador Lana Nusseibeh, the first woman to hold the position as UAE permanent representative to the UN, is leading a task force with the permanent representative from Colombia of over 80 member states who want to help establish gender parity in senior level management positions at the UN. And the new Secretary General has committed to it. This is not to say that the UAE has overcome the challenges related to women's empowerment. In fact, they will be the first to say they have work to do. It is only to say that something very interesting is happening. The cultural changes are not dependent on legal reforms. And in a country that must navigate an Islamic identity, it may at times be beneficial to proceed by example, rather than legal reforms that appear to contradict Sharia in order to avoid triggering the backlash, as has happened in other countries, that could undermine the progress quietly happening behind the scenes among Emirati families. These conclusions offer a way out of an ongoing debate in the women's and human rights community between cultural relativists who feel each country should be able to define human rights according to their own traditions, and those who view human rights as universal, because without disobeying Sharia or enacting legal codes that seem to contradict it, perhaps the key is to have a leadership that offers an example that will inspire families to encourage their daughters to reach their full potential and be Muslim. So now I'm going to turn to Sheikha Al-Qasimi and ask her a few questions that are related to the paper, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Sheikha Al-Qasimi, to what do you attribute what I saw as a relaxation of the traditional rules within families over the last 2 decades in the UAE? Do you agree, as I argue in my paper, that the top-down approach taken by the UAE government and leadership by example has led to these cultural changes despite the absence of a complete rewriting of the law?
Thank you, and thank you for hosting me here. This reminded me of an anecdote of my own when I studied in California. It was in 1976. And at that time when I wanted to go to, first I went to the UK in 1975, then I moved on to California. And my mother decided that I should not be going alone. So my brother went with me as a chaperone. Now remember, now we have direct flights coming to San Francisco from the UAE. It was no issue. But at that time, I had to board a flight to London and then maybe stay a day and then from there continue to California. And the first time my brother did this, it was fine. You know, my brother accompanied me. But second time I said, look, I'm going to make a deal with you. I mean, this is a waste of your time. So both my brother and I had agreed that we will reach London. He can relax there. I will reach California. And then once I was in California, I'll call him up and say, okay, you can go home whenever you want. So the idea was, the families, and I need you to understand this, the family didn't do this because the Sharia said this. The families do this out of concern. We grew up in a sheltered environment. As girls, we were protected by the parents, very small community, and this business of sending a girl so far away and thinking that maybe she's by herself would put a concern in the family traditionally. And then if the parents were liberal enough to say that was okay, then they get the pressure from the family of saying, why did you let her go to the US or to the UK? Can't she just go to the university here? Well, she wants to major in computer science. Computer science doesn't exist at the universities here. So that kind of pressure was happening. But what's important is to understand and realize, if you look across through the Muslim countries, all the way from Afghanistan to Morocco, and you see images of women from all these different places, do we look the same in the way we dress? No. Do we look the same as we practice our Sharia? No. What is dominant in all these societies is the cultural aspect over the religion. So, for example, maybe in Afghanistan or some other places, they will not allow a woman even to walk on the street, so they may not allow her to get education even as a girl. In other societies, it's not. You go to Lebanon, for example, they're quite liberal. Jordan is the same. So the idea is, while religion is there, religion is an individualized relationship between a person and God. This is how we actually interpret Islam. And therefore, you will not, if people even judge you, it's wrong, but the judgment should be between you and God. Now, Sharia is different. Sharia was put in place because Islam was considered to be a religion of the soul, you know, worshipping and with faith, but it was also with the society structure. And the Sharia is nothing but a society structure to put laws and regulation, you know, if you steal, if you don't, if you cheat. So the idea is that it is law and regulation that's been put in, but part of this, what you were saying, the chaperoning and all of this, it really is not really the hardcore of Sharia. Even if people say that, if you go there, you will not see written in the Sharia in the UAE that says that a woman has to be accompanied by a chaperone whenever she goes anywhere. It doesn't even say that you actually have to have someone take permission from your husband or from the parents when you get married. None of this exists. But the most important part is how your family agree to these things. And the family values change from one community to another, even within the UAE. In some families, it's more conservative, in some families, it was okay for them. So for me, the UAE doesn't really look at these issues, but as you said, late Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the country, had actually put forward that the education of women is a first priority. And today, if you look at literacy, UAE is considered one of the top countries when it comes to women education and to literacy of women. And when I'm talking about ranking, it's probably number 1 or 2, and not, I mean, worldwide, it's not even halfway through. But the point was that the society will never, and this is late Sheikh Zayed's say, that society will not thrive or grow or progress if the women were not educated. You educate a woman not because she has to work, that's an option. For us, it's your choice if you want to work or not. But education is a must. That is something that the government does not compromise. And the idea is you may not work, if that's an option you want it to do, but you're going to raise children, and the children need, it does require an educated woman. But throughout the year, if you look at if you look at the society of the UAE and as economic structure, UAE is a very expensive place to live. So today, also by needs, you will find that in every house, especially the young generation, it's a 2-income house. So women would work intellectually for them, but also because of the money. The money is needed to raise children, to have a nice house, to travel. So it becomes similar to the societies here, that you do need the 2 salaries. So one operates for your existence, and the other one could be put to withdraw a loan for you if you're building something or you need something. So to me, it's not, and the Sharia itself is not really the driver, and I think you said that rightly within your paper. But the government had discovered that sometimes, and the government's very close to the people, and they believed maybe the best way to do this is by, in every phase of life, they will appoint a woman for a particular position or job. For example, my appointment in 2004 had stirred some heads. People questioned, people accepted, people encouraged, people criticized. There were all kinds of views. It wasn't one. But they waited. They wanted to know, is she going to deliver or not? And with the backing of the government, definitely. I think 2004 throughout till 2008, the government, the economy was thriving. It was quite high at that time in terms of GDP. So for them, that was a good example to believe in and have the confidence in the government and the decision that they made. And from there on, it went from 1 to 2, and then 4, and now 8. So now it's become the norm. But for the government, it's important that whenever they find a woman that can shine as a star, they believe that this woman can deliver, they would put her in a post where she can deliver. For example, we have a woman, and I think you wrote about Maryam al-Mansouri.
Yeah.
Now, she's a military, what is it called? She's an Air Force
Fighter pilot.
fighter pilot. And even for the Americans at that time who were in a joint mission, one of them was asking, it's a woman on the other line. They did not believe that she would actually lead the fleet of the UAE on the F-15 at that time. So the examples are there, but all it takes for the government is to bring one, and then this becomes the norm. So the top-down approach is easier in the UAE. Sometimes you will question, where is democracy? What is this? This is not democracy. Well, let's define democracy. Is democracy election? No, it's not. The election is the path for you, not the end result. The end result is you need to have a satisfied, happy society that has a government that provides for it. So if that happens, it doesn't matter what kind of democracy had delivered that, but you can't have the democracy that exists in Germany or in the US or other places. Every country has its own mechanism. It knows its cultural background. It understands where to move things, where to change things going forward. And therefore, that was the formula that the United Arab Emirates had used by pushing forward, putting women, a Minister of State for Happiness, putting the youngest minister in the world, 22 years old. That in itself was an achievement for her, for us, worldwide, for the youth, for people like yourselves. So it is a top-down. Maybe other countries may use something different, but for this, I was a well-trusted person when I came to the government because I've been a first in many prior to that, whether leading technology in Dubai ports, starting up an e-commerce platform where it became profitable and valued quite high within 3 years. That in itself was a huge achievement at that time.
And I want to say that for a very young country, their rate of literacy is 95%, an astonishing amount of progress in a very short amount of time, and that more girls than boys in the UAE actually graduate from secondary school and university. So as Minister of Tolerance, and also in your previous ministerial positions, have you witnessed in the case of yourself and other women something unique that women bring to the table? This is the argument that some feminists use for increasing female leadership globally, that women bring something unique. Do you believe that is the case?
I do believe that we are all creative regardless of our gender. We bring something to the table. Sometimes I think, and within our societies, women grow to be supporters of families at home. They know how to look after children. They are multitasking. And a women culture in an organization, and I can bring example about this, brings with it some certain sensitivities being actually a part of a family. When you raise kids or you've got a family of your own, that in itself helps. That when you look at an organization, you look at it as your own family. You bring that cultural aspect to it. But that doesn't say that this is only exclusive to the women. I think there are great men that would have the same kind of sentiment. But the combination, physically, the brain of the woman is structured differently than the man. The women, the two sides of the brain are actually bridged in many parts, and therefore could actually make women more linguistics than men. Women analyze much more than the men. And there are books on this. So I didn't make up this. I think maybe you need to do the right reference. I hope I'm correct with this. But for example, and this the men will laugh. The men are very good with spatial. So when it comes to where they are when they drive, you know how people sometimes say women are terrible with driving. But the idea is that because men actually can excel on that, they have the notion within their brain to actually do that perfectly. So to me, it's a cultural aspect of each individual of what they bring to the organization. And I think when you have, as you see it in families, you see it in classes at universities, you see it everywhere. When you have the combination in itself, you put yourself in a good environment. I remember once when I was doing Tijari.com, the e-commerce platform, my CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, and we were running the Oracle Exchange, which is a hefty technology. It was not something easy. And we were handling quite a lot of bidding online at that time. And there was something wrong. There was a major glitch for us on the exchange. And he was working day and night with his team. And I was asking about when will he resolve this problem. And he said, well, this should, within a week, we should be able to solve it. But I would like to ask you, as the CEO, if you don't mind, my mother is in ICU in India. He was an Indian. And when we finish this problem, once we solve it and the system is up and running, if I can go to India. I turned around and I closed the door and I told them, you are leaving this afternoon. You are not going to be here. This problem, I can solve it with you by phone, by connection on the internet while you're in India. But I will never forgive myself if something wrong had happened, if his mother had died. I thought it was his time to be close and be supportive of his family and his mother and be in India, we can solve the problem with him. But his physical presence didn't have to be there. He went and he was there for a couple of weeks. We solved our problems while he was there. He helped us a great deal. And then he got back, and then 10 days later, his mother passed away. And I asked him, do you want to go back? He said, no, I said goodbye to her when I was there. But he said, I am loyal to you for the rest of my life. The essence that you do one act to an individual within your organization resonates well when it comes to loyalty. Employees don't ask for money. Money is not the only incentive that you have in an organization. It's companies, people in companies want to know that they're part of something. They want to know that you support them, that you know about them, you know about their families. I had a tendency to know and ask questions all the time about everybody's family. So whatever organization I was in, I knew all the people, I know their families. But maybe I think that might be just my nature as a woman, that I will do that. So this maybe in my mind, I would think were maybe different or maybe the same.
One of the biggest challenges remaining for women that I found in my research in the Emirates was that it had actually to do with the rights of non-nationals, non-Emiratis, who comprise some 88% of the total population. As Minister of Tolerance, can you discuss any steps that are being taken to help protect the rights of non-national women who could be more vulnerable and often work in lower paid jobs such as domestic service or retail?
Excellent question. I think sometimes when we look at statistics and we don't know the analogy behind it, could actually give us maybe a different perception. United Arab Emirates has about 8 million people. 20% are actually the nationals. So we constitute the lesser number. 80% are the expatriate community. We have 200 nationalities in the UAE. Now, when it comes to the Emiratis, the employment mandates both men and women. So it is no surprise that you'd find a large number of women and a percentage in the government. Government work is actually shorter hours. It's from 7:30 to 2:30. And a lot of women actually opt and prefer the government job because they have families. So the government jobs are populated with women. But the 80% of UAE society, how do they come to the UAE? Why would they come? They come because there's a reason for their existence. Some come because companies had asked them. There's a private sector. So we do not dictate the number or the quality of how many women the private sector should bring with them. So in one aspect, it is naturally, you will see when you look at if you look at the UAE exclusively at the numbers between the gender, you will see the numbers. You'll see the 50-50. You'll see the higher number or percentage of women in terms of employment in the government. But when you look at the larger scale of the 100% altogether, you will see that the number of women are much less. Because the women abroad not all of them decide that UAE is the place they want. Either they are married, they've got families, they've got a husband working. On the other side, you have men who are coming, maybe their wives want to work. So when you look at these numbers, you're not really seeing the women that are there. The numbers are a lot less in organization. You see women maybe in the airline, you'll see them in the aircrafts as flight attendant, some of the expatriate women. You will see some in the high-level career, like executives, but very small number. But that's a choice of the companies themselves and the private sector and how they bring. However, UAE is similar to a lot of other societies, have the option of help with, extra help with domestic staff. And this is not just the Emiratis, but throughout all the different community that we have, all different expatriates. So it is natural that you see countries like Indonesia, Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, and the government encourage that because it's a high population societies, and they encourage a lot of women to go abroad, and a lot of them who are more related to the domestic. So when you look at the statistics, you see the majority of these women may be in domestic level, and you think, well, They constitute a big number, but in the same time, they're not protected by the law. The law protects them. It's people or the companies who have them who may not adhere to the law in terms of protecting them. The United Arab Emirates as a government structured two organizations, major ones, the one in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, that protect violence against domestic helpers or abuse. They are entitled and they should be able to come and actually reach out to the government through the entities, the organization there, to actually complain, whether domestic helpers or blue collar. But when you look at the numbers, I agree, you may see the numbers are only women of a lower level of jobs rather than high. But that's because we don't control who comes to the UAE, and therefore you don't see a lot of executive women coming on board. I hope that explains the analogy.
Yes, thank you. I know some scholars had been concerned, they had expressed concerns that there were class differences. And my next question, you might touch on that. It is a question that you did address a little bit, and then we will open the floor to the audience. It is argued that democracies create the most empowering environments for women globally, and yet the UAE has exceeded in some respects some democracies with regard to women's representation in the cabinet and in industries dominated by males normally, including the fields of science and technology. What is your view on why some countries are able to move forward on women's empowerment and others not, regardless of whether they are a democracy? What are the ingredients required? You did touch on this a little bit, but you might have
Well,
more.
because I'm a firm believer that democracy process is not a cookie cutter. You can't come from an American society and tell society you have to do this kind of democracy, because even your democracy is different than the one in Europe and is different than the one in Asia. So the idea here, regardless, let's take everything out. Let's strip all of this and think, okay, how do I mobilize a society and make sure, as we say, you emancipate the society of the women, of bringing them forward. So this takes several areas. One is regulation and law. In the UAE, for example, we don't have a gender law. There's no law in the UAE that says, and for women is this, because the minute you do that, we believe, or we interpret this as you actually already discriminating women by creating a law for them. So for us, it's the law touches both gender, regardless. So sometimes regulation, quotas had helped in Chamber of Commerce, in private sector. So sometimes, but I'm also not a person that drives interest in quotas in organization. You can use it as a temporary measure or a drive, but then you should change it, because numbers by quotas sometimes could only mean numbers. You can bring women, stick them in there, but not really encouraging them or incentivizing them to actually produce well. There are other ways of doing it. UAE use it by example. In this day and age, I think when we talk about the millennials, I don't think any of this work. Today, I think what we have is a very powerful young nation worldwide that understands their right better than anyone else. They are independent. They know what they want. I look at some of them. I look at my nephews, my nieces, and I think, my God, I was like that. They're in their 20s, and I was like that when I was in my 40s. So there's a difference of time. It's changed. I think the young generation understand what they want. They know what they need. They pursue their education. They're solid on their ground. They just need to integrate more with the society and understand it. But very ambitious. In some ways, they are nomadic in their behavior. They're in a place, but they move quickly, and sometimes they travel. Some like experience overseas. But they are different. And we have to understand that. We have to understand how best we can actually deliver. In the UAE right now, there are several programs, including innovation, SME, enterprises, lots of things to encourage a lot of the young people to look for these opportunities for themselves, find ways, whether they have innovative ideas, the government will reward them, or private sector. But in the same time, encourage them to have startup companies and create a new, and it's very thriving at the moment. And the girls are, we have the SMEs, for example. Every Emirates, we are 7 Emirates. Every Emirates in the UAE has a council that supports SME. Well, guess what? Every time there was a startup of this council, 50% of the SMEs are women, everywhere. So it's not even let's do something where we encourage the women to be entrepreneurs. They are already there. I think the young generation have good energy and very positive attitude.
Yes, I found that in my research when I spoke with university students. They said
All
that it was
happy.
because happy, and also that the older generation, just by taking the leadership position, not a specific rhetoric or messaging from the government, but just by being in those leadership positions, they knew that they could also aspire to those.
Yes.
We will now open up the floor to questions. You can ask one or both of us a question about the research or in general about Sheikha Al-Qasimi's work.
There's one at the
Yes,
end over there.
yes, please. Khalea Sfandiari.
Thank you very much. I'm Haleh Spandiari from the Wilson Center. Impediments. You talked to a number of women for your research. Sheikha Lubna, you had a long and diverse career. Can you talk a little bit about, over the years, generations, the impediments that women, when starting to work, felt and how they managed to get over it, and what you were told, Ken, in your research? Thank you.
All right, great question. If I sit here today and I'll say I made it through with so many jobs in the last 32 years, and you would think that I didn't have any issues or problem, then I did not tell you the truth. Every organization I went to, sometimes I have to wait for people to trust my opinion within my delivery, either as a computer engineer, but if you want people to listen to you, you have to listen to them first. And that's how you gain. Also, you deliver what I call quick wins, because you need to step into an organization. I was always in an odd situation with a job. In every job I had, that I was the first in that one, or it was odd to have a woman leading that senior post. So lead by example. And one of the most important challenge, I think, and this is a story that now we take it for granted, nobody asked about this, is the women starting to drive. That was in the 70s in the UAE. Sharjah, my hometown, was the first. And even within my family, I was in the US at that time, but my older sister started driving. And my grandmother got really upset. And she told my mom, so how dare you would let her drive? What is this? You think she's a so-and-so? And my mom said, that's her call. She wants to drive, let her drive. It's something she should try. There's nothing wrong. It started with a lot of questions and people not protesting publicly, but not understanding it. But you know what? It settled very quickly because the parents realized that if dad wanted to go to the hospital, the girl was always there, the daughter. She will take him to the hospital. Mom wants us to go shopping, where the girl was there, the daughter was there. And all of a sudden, this became normal, and it was okay. So things happen. Nothing happens by dictating it and saying it was okay and it would happen. No, there will always be challenges. But people eventually resolve to accepting it in a good way, not that it's forced on them. And they see results in these aspects, and therefore they're okay. But this is one example I wanted to show, the driving.
And in my research, I noted that a minister said, actually, I'll start with a businesswoman, Najla Midfa. She said that her parents would not let her travel for her first job. This was back in the 1980s, and she was supposed to go to Cairo. She just refused.
She was a consultant. She was in consulting job, I think, at that time.
And she just went without their permission. And she had a very successful career since then. And now she has a younger sister who she says goes to rock concerts every week when she used to not be allowed to do that.
I went to rock concerts, but that was in Chico, California.
Another
It's a great
impediment.
place for concerts. Phil Collins.
Another impediment was among some of the bureaucrats I spoke with. They said that their ideas were taken by men sometimes if they didn't claim them very not aggressively, I guess, and that it just would sort of pass as a man's idea much more easily than a woman's idea, but that happened when they were abroad more than it did in the UAE. So let's see, another
I have a
real
story for you for that one.
Okay.
I mean, don't laugh. But I was in a senior post at some points where some of my ideas were resisted by my boss, who was a male. So it was a man. And I had to think, do I want my projects to work or I want to fight this guy? And you know what? I put all my ideas in one of the other consultants in the organization, and he pushed it through. He was the man, and it worked. And I didn't care. I know my job was done. I got all the systems that I wanted. I got all the achievement. So you have to decide for yourself what is more important to you and your ego. Is that important or the delivery? People will find out soon who you are, what you do. In any place you go or you work, you'll be there, even if someone had taken your ideas. If you go a little bit deeper, a senior person would ask that person for that particular project, they will know soon it was not that person's idea, but yours as a woman. So the depth of knowledge in any project that you do will make it easy for people to discover that you are the right person. But that's my own philosophy. But I was a person of a different generation, and it was harder to fight these things. But
And
that was another impediment.
yeah. And then a final one is, of course, the workforce numbers in the private sector, as Sheikh Lubna mentioned, that the women are mainly in the public sector. So that's an
Also-
area that could use more.
Right, but I've noticed in the private sector, the banking sector was fine. A lot of our banks, and when I say banks, not the national banks of the UAE, but also some of the foreign banks that we had, would recruit a lot of women, especially in the services area with customers, managers of branches. But a lot of the banks had created this unique service for elderly women at home. So some of the women will not actually come and queue up in the bank. So what they did, a bank would offer, I mean, some of these women were wealth. They've created the service where some of the bankers will go home to them and serve them and finish all the transaction at home. And some of these were women in that. And that worked quite conveniently. Sometimes the job in the private sector requires a lot of traveling. And the girls or the women would shy away from that because they have family, they have got kids, and they feel guilty, or they don't believe this is the job they want because there's so much travel in it. So they may shy away of jobs like consulting.
Oh, we have time for one or two more questions. Yes.
Thank you. Hello, it's so nice for both of you to be on this panel tonight. I'm actually from Austin, Texas, but I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so I'm kind of a little bit familiar with the unique differences that different women face. So you brought up the really great point.
Can you speak louder or get the microphone closer? Yeah.
It's on.
Yeah.
I can't hear myself. So I wanted to ask you, because you brought up a really good point about how Muslim women, we often discuss them as a monolith, kind of like all kind of the same, but they're actually very different.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I know you're from the UAE and that's your particular area, but I wanted to ask you if there was like a Gulf discourse on the different commonalities between like women and feminism there, and like if so, what kind of conversations women are having within the Gulf countries. Thank you.
That's a very good question. You may think differently about Saudi Arabia, thinking, well, women don't drive, but you know what? The women there are the wealthiest. They run businesses, they know how to manage their businesses, they're very smart, they travel. And within the Chamber of Commerce, there are businesswomen councils within the UAE, but also in Saudi and other places, and they meet a lot. That is one common denominator, but it's a good one. Rather than the government and the policy, for us, we don't look at ourselves as women in this government and that government and let's get together. It doesn't work like this. I may have a male counterpart or a female. But in the business, yes, I think that works a lot. At universities and conferences, when a lot of girls meet, or if they are studying here in the US or the UK or Australia, you will find that there's a lot of network, a lot of dialogue amongst the girls or the women themselves. Yes.
One more question.
I don't know if I was late, so forgive me. But I know you haven't hosted the World Expo 2020 for years. I'm just asking, as the king gave an indication that he will tolerate viewpoints expressed on the pavilions of the expo, even if they don't conform to the state religion, such as gender equality, neutrality, acceptance of
Other religions,
or religious viewpoints. They're or different religions other than the Sunni Islam at the pavilions at the World Expo 2020? Has he given indication that they'll be allowed?
I don't think UAE needs to be in 2020 to do that. This exists already. I have three of my guests here from the Christian churches from the UAE. They're brought over. They're sitting right behind you. Is Reverend Andy and the Coptic Church and Sona from the Armenian Church there. So no, we run our society. We run our businesses of tapping wealth of ideas and thoughts and people. We don't look at who brings it and why they are and what they are. It's not about just Expo, but I think in general the UAE is a tolerant society.
Thank you, Sheikh Al-Qasimi. It was an honor to
Thank
interview
you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for Wilson Center.
Thank both of you. I just wanted us all to walk away with a couple of things that really struck me. It's been an enlightening morning. I have so many things I'd like to say, but the one act and the one can become the norm I really like, not just across tolerance, but across all sorts of values and the humanity piece of it. You know, we're talking about, when we talk about gender equality here with the project, we talk about changing institutions, changing mindsets, empowering women and men in order to be able to do this. And I think what you're talking about, all of these clear mandates and norms about the values and the culture is incredibly important and a real good piece of what we're trying to do.
If I may add, I don't want you, and this is my advice to everyone, and I say it over and over, do not judge societies just by their religion or what they believe. Sometimes the cultural aspect takes time for change. And sometimes in modern society, you can build high rises very fast, but you can't change a nation when it comes to its culture. It will take time, but they have to change on their own pace, not someone else's.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing that today across a variety of issues in a variety of regions of the world. So thank you very much to Sheikh Lubna and to Dr. Kent Davis-Packard. I love saying that. Thank you both. And thank you to the audience for coming today. We're very happy to have you. And have a great Friday and a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Me, great travel.
I know. And please get on the plane.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great. Thank you.